Hi, my name's John Beaudry. I'm the author of Garden Sanctuary, Designing for Comfort, Wholeness, and Connection. It's a how-to garden design book that takes you through a transformative journey of creating your own personal connection to nature, your own garden sanctuary. Today I'm going to share with you 43 great plants for zones 7, 8, and 9, the zones of Texas in particular. And I'm going to start with trees because that's how I like to design. I like to start with the largest structural elements of the garden that kind of create the framework, the bones of the garden, you could say. And then we'll work down to the shrub layer and then the perennial layer. You can also get into ephemerals, which are like tulips and daffodils bulbs that only come up for a very short time and then disappear. We're not going to talk about those today, but I'm going to give you a great start with some great trees, shrubs, and perennials. I'm going to be using a software called Plant Master. You can subscribe to it with an annual subscription, about $200 a year. And I've created a profile that I'm using for this presentation, but you can create profiles for all of your clients, and you can send them a link to the profile so that they have that for perpetuity. And as you add and subtract plants, that link will be updated and they'll have a permanent record of all the plants that you chose for their garden. So let's get into the presentation now. I'm going to share So this is the Plant Master, and we're going to go with, start with Aeschylus carnea. This one's called Fort McNair. And just a little note about cultivars. Cultivar stands for cultivated variety, and it's always indicated with single apostrophe marks on either side. And anyone can create a cultivated variety if they send in the name and get it certified, which you'll have some kind of wacky names as a result of that. People will name them after their kids, after experiences they had, all kinds of stuff. So, and the other thing about it is that you may not be able to find Fort McNair in your area, but you can certainly find another variety. And why a cultivated variety over the species? Aeschylus carnea is the species. Just a quick name about Latin names. We've got the genus name, Aeschylus, and we've got the species name, carnea, which is also called the specific epithet. And then this is the cultivated variety, and that's what somebody has chosen because it has some unique characteristic. In this case, larger, showier flowers. All right, so let's go into some photographs and really look at what this plant looks like. Here's a young one going in, great color, early spring, just after all the leaves have come out. You have these striking pink flowers. It's a head turner when people drive by this plant. Really amazing. One of the photographs they have in here, I'm getting to it right now, is of this plant, and look at it's reverted. This was probably the original tree, and then this came from the rootstock, and this is the regular Aeschylus carnea, and look at it's making white flowers. So you always want to catch those things early and remove that. A lot of plants will have a tendency, especially variegated plants will have tendencies to revert back to the original variety, and that's because really a plant that has white in the leaves isn't photosynthesizing. It's not really in terms of survival of the fittest. It's not. We're choosing survival because they're pretty, or because they do something that provides a little greater hardiness or adaptability to diseases and all those kinds of things. So let's see, let's go. I don't want to start with this one yet. I want to go to another Aeschylus and then go back to another Aeschylus. Another in the horse chestnut family is Aeschylus parviflora. Parviflora is small flowered, but on a very big inflorescence. So get these amazing 15 to 20 inch long flower heads in the middle of summer at a time when many other things don't bloom. You can see this forms quite a big mass. This is probably a couple of different plants here, but they'll grow about 6 to 8 feet tall and 10 to 12 feet wide. This bark is not of this plant. This is probably some other Aeschylus. This is a close-up of the leaves coming out. Here's a close-up of the flower, the small flower, many small flowers on a long raceme. This is the buckeye fruit, horse chestnut fruit. Close-ups of the flowers. Look at that bloom. How can you not love that? Coming into a little bit of fall color. It's just not a very exciting fall color, unfortunately. It's just kind of a dull yellow, but it makes up for it in flowers. Amelanchier. Amelanchier is a really great tree. It's a small flowering tree. It blooms in June. It's often called the Juneberry because it blooms in June. It's also called serviceberry. I never knew why until I heard P. Allen Smith talk in the Chicago Botanic Garden, and he was talking about, we cut the flowers of it for the Sunday service, and maybe that's how you guys say it down there, but the Sunday service, and so I've heard it called the serviceberry, and I never knew why they called it serviceberry, but it's just how they say it in the South. Common names can be very confusing, but they can also tell us about how we use the plants. For example, this plant is also called shadbush, and it's called shadbush because it grows around rivers in the South and along the banks of rivers, and there's a certain kind of fish that swim up the streams in the spring, like salmon do in the north, called shad. And so people ask when the shad blow, when they swim upriver, and others will respond, the shad bush blooms the shad blow when the shad bush blooms. So the shad bush is it nature. The takeaway from this is that nature is always in sync with itself. So you can't really say this disease will become active at this time of year because spring can be a month early or a month late, but we can say this disease will be active when such and such a plant blooms, or the fish will swim when this plant blooms, and that always happens in sync because nature's always in sync with itself. So that's pretty interesting. This has Autumn Brilliance is selected for its fall color. They tend to have multiple stems. That's the nature of the tree. You can buy them as single stem, but I think that's kind of a bit of an abomination. It's really adaptable, many different varieties out there to suit many different needs for a small garden. Let's go on to the next one. I'm going to stick with trees first. We're going to go with Betula nigra, which is birch. This is the river birch. It does grow along riverbanks and does like a little bit more water than the other birch that we're going to talk about, the Betula pendula. But it can grow quite large, 30 to 40 feet tall and wide. It has extremely beautiful exfoliating bark. Let's take a look at that. There you go. That's quite nice. And there's a variety called Heritage river birch, which looks more like this and will never grow as tall as the straight species. You could see that this has they tend to have a pale yellow, not a very showy fall color, but it is yellow, and they were smart to contrast some burning bush here in front of it, some euonymus that we know is going to turn red in the fall, and we can really orchestrate beautiful color schemes in the fall with fall color when you know what the plants are going to grow. This is the key takeaway I want you to take away from today, is that you want to choose plants based on the right plant for the right spot. When you're designing a garden, the tendency is to go out and buy all the pretty plants, and okay, where are we going to put them all? And you got a mess, guaranteed. But if you say, I need a plant here that's going to be only 3 feet tall because I don't want it to grow over my window, and I know it's going to be a little shady, so I need something that takes shade, and I want it to bloom in spring. Well, there you've got your characteristics. Now you go find a plant that fits those characteristics, as opposed to, oh, pretty plant, take it home. Where will I put it? It can work that way, but if you haven't really figured out what you need where, then you're missing the point. So that's my design sense speaking. I being in this industry all my life, the most common thing I run into is that people have planted a couple of cute little plants by their front door and they've overgrown the entire house, and that's because nobody read the label. So this is this Betula pendula, the European white birch, and it has this beautiful weeping habit and extraordinary white bark. It's a beautiful tree to plant in groves. This is kind of, I think like 3 or 4 more of these would have been really outstanding. especially if it had been a little bit more room for them all in there. But that's how they grow in nature in groves, and the verticality of all these white stems coming up can be really, really attractive. You have to be careful to give it the proper needs. If a plant is stressed by not getting enough water, or if it's too hot for it, it can they're very sensitive to bronze birch borers, which will definitely damage the tree and eventually kill it. Here's one that they've trained into a spiral. I can't stand this kind of stuff because its focus is on something that's not going to be able to be maintained. This will stay in the trunk, but it's going to grow into a large tree, and it's going to look weirder, not prettier, as it gets older. Anyway, I should probably leave my comments out. But here, this plant's a little stressed. You can see it's thinning out in the canopy, and maybe the thing to do here would be take away the lawn and put some mulch around the tree so that it isn't competing with the grass roots. Grass roots will grow down easily 2 feet, whereas tree roots are in the top 6 inches of the soil. So keep that in mind. Here they planted a nice grove of them. Very nice effect. On to the next. Oh, that's bench papilifera, sorry. Okay, Cercis canadensis. I'm going to start with the straight species, Cercis canadensis, the eastern redbud. This plant is a very dense canopy and produces quite a bit of shade. It has a nice yellow fall color, little heart-shaped leaves. Heart-shaped leaves. Has these. It's in the legume family, so it produces it works with bacteria that get into the roots and create nitrogen for the plant and for plants around it. So they're a nitrogen fixing plant, and they have something called caducous flowering, which means they bloom along the stems of the plant as opposed to at the tips like most plants. And this plant has a tremendous amount of variation, and as such, it's a small tree. It's only going to grow about 20-25 feet tall, and there's also a Cercis canadensis forest pansy. This one is selected for its purple leaves, which are very, very pretty in the garden. Contrasting with an all green background like this is quite stunning. Again, these flowers up close are pretty special, but from a distance they really make a great show. And the next one I want to talk about is Cercis canadensis Hearts of Gold, which has this beautiful lime green color to the leaves. And again, this is you see how dense this tree is and creates some very thick shade underneath it. I think this is actually another cultivar. I can't remember the name of it, but it has these golden tips. That might be a mistake in here, but another great plant for a smaller space garden. Oh, there's also out here we have the western redbud. That's Cercis occidentalis. If you're in a drier area, you would want to maybe think about that plant. It tends to be more multi-stem and bushy from the ground and a little bit more coarse, rugged plant, but it tolerates drier conditions. Another one for drier conditions is this Cercis canadensis merlot, which is bred to tolerate more heat. But again, it has that great purple foliage that's really nice. Cyananthus, or fringe tree, is another great plant. There are some pictures in here that I think are of the next one I'm going to show you, which is Cyananthus virginicus. Let's see this close up of this flower. I think this is Cyananthus virginicus, but the flowers are smaller, and this is the retusus. It's generally a larger plant, generally a single stem tree form, whereas virginicus is more of a shrub form and has larger, showier flowers. This is retusus, which has these little bit smaller flowers. You'll see when we get to the next one the difference. It has very nice striated bark in an older plant. really classy plant. Nice structure, really great flowering. Smaller size plant that let's see, they're growing 25 feet tall and wide, 12 to 25. And then Cainanthus virginicus is more of a shrub type plant. It's also saying 12 to 25 feet. I don't think it grows to 25 feet. I think it's more like 8 to 10. So here's a close-up. You can see the flowers are very fringy on this one. The leaves are much larger, and this is what you get. It's just like this massive color. And they all oftentimes will be, that one was limbed up a little bit, but more often you'll see them as big masses all the way to the ground. I don't know what that is. And here's the fruit of it. It's a drupe. Okay. Let's go sort by trees and keep going with trees. A Kentucky coffee tree, Gymnocletus dioicus, or Gymnocletus dioicus. People in their common names get so fussy. They'll say, oh, it's not Gymnocletus, it's Gymnocletus. And there was a guy named Rob Proctor who worked for the Denver Botanic Garden, and he did a lecture once, and he said he gets so sick of it that when people say, oh, it's supposed to be Gymnocletus, not Gymnocletus. Oh, he say, oh, well, that's the way I used to say it. It's kind of crazy. So it has it's a very coarse tree, and in winter, because it has these pinnately compound leaves, and when the leaves drop, all of these little twigs drop, and you're left with just the main branches. So here it is in leaf, and here it is in winter, and it's quite coarse and quite dramatic tree. Makes quite a statement. Not for a small garden. It's a very large plant. Look at this little bench down here. There it is, a smaller one, just leafing out in spring, very coarse bark, and it has these seed pods which can be quite messy. So there's also a variety that doesn't have seed pods, and that one is called Gymnocletus dioicus espresso, JFS. There are probably other varieties that don't have seeds, but if you're looking for one that's cleaner, you would definitely want to choose one of these. This shows the fall color, which can be a beautiful clear yellow. There's the leaves up close again. There's a row of them, bark. Another great large plant. Okay, let's sort by trees down here. Now we're going to go into Lagerstromia, or the crepe myrtle. You're probably familiar with this plant, but you may not know that they're very susceptible to powdery mildew, and there are several varieties that have Indian names, like Zuni, that are much more tolerant of and resistant to powdery mildew. So that opens up more possibilities for you. This is really the color of it. It's a really great purple on this plant, and it only grows 12 to 15 feet tall and about 6 feet wide. So it's a really good small tree for small areas. You don't have to go in and prune it to keep it small. It's just going to stay small naturally. Look at that great color. And it will bloom 3 or 4 times through the summer, and then it drops its leaves in the winter and has this amazing exfoliating bark. It has to get probably about 10 years of age at least before you start to see some of this exfoliation, but it can be quite dramatic. And in this species, there are varieties that grow 20, 25, 30 feet tall, and then there's varieties that grow very small like this. And today they've come out with even smaller varieties that are shrub form, and they're only grow 4 to 6 feet tall, and again bloom several times through the season. So it's a lot of versatility in this genus, and versatility and variation, and you can pick one that's right for the garden combination that you're coming up with. So this one is called Arapaho, another Indian name, and it has gorgeous red foliage. It's a little bit, it's also in the 6 to 12 range, they're saying, in height. I'm leaning towards smaller plants because more and more of our gardens are smaller, and that's also the trend in breeding these days. This catawba is very similar um, to zuni. So if zuni's not available, you can try catawba. It's also a smaller plant, purple, pretty similar color purple. I prefer zuni only because I've used it more and I know I'm familiar with it and I know I can trust what it's going to do. So then one last one, Tuskegee. And Tuskegee is also very red, and it also has kind of a maroon foliage, so it's a very dark tree at a glance. You can kind of see it has this really great red blooms. And this one grows up to 25 feet. So and the last of our trees is Parkinsonia Desert Museum. This is actually an interspecies cross between, it's like crossing a cat and a dog in nature. And there's a lot of nurseries out there that sell something similar, but not exactly Desert Museum. So be sure that you're getting the right one. It should bloom all summer long. And this is it, just crowded with flowers. And it'll bloom from early spring through late fall and has this incredible green bark. This is just before it comes into bloom. I'm, suspicious that this could be the regular Palo Verde is only blooms for a very short time and looks like this most of the year. I don't think that this is Desert Museum if it's midsummer and it's not blooming. So this is what you should see, covered with flowers. And look at the ground. It's also covered with flowers. It's been blooming a long time, and they just keep going, going, going. This is a great picture because they put succulents underneath here. One of the nice things about this plant is light comes through the plant. It's not so densely, like in contrast to the Eastern redbud, which is very shady and dark tree. This is very translucent. The light comes through it and into the house, and then great filtered light for succulents, which a lot of succulents really prefer. So that's our Desert Museum Palo Verde. Great plant. Now we're going to start heading into some shrubs. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Aesculus parviflora. This is a shrub that will grow 6 to 12 feet high and wide. It blooms in the middle of summer with these bottle brush-like flowers. It's quite extraordinary. It does not have bark like this. That's a mistake. It does have new growth coming out like that. It does have these beautiful long racemes of flowers that can be 16 to 20 inches long easily. Gets kind of a buckeye type fruit to it. Close up of the flowers, close up of the fruit, more flowers. And look at that, just riot of bloom at a time when many other things are not blooming. So it's a great plant for barriers, for hedgerows, that kind of thing. And let's go back to shrubs. Hydrangea quercifolia. Hydrangea quercifolia is the oak leaf hydrangea, and Snow Queen is a variety that has larger, bigger flowers. This plant has both sterile flowers, these outer ones, and fertile flowers on the inside here. So it has this very starry effect to the flowers, and it's great for shade. It will grow in almost full shade. It won't flower quite as much, but you'll still get these beautiful oak leaf leaves. It also has great exfoliation on the stems, if that's able to see that. Look at this one, a nice big one, just covered with flowers. And these come late in the summer, so around August is the time for them to bloom. Again, another time when a lot of other plants aren't blooming. Lavenders. Lavenders are great plants, but beware, a lot of them won't survive in zones 7 and 8. This one will, and even Lavandula angustifolia, straight species, won't survive in 7 or 8, but blue cushion will. So when you're buying a lavender, make sure that it's one that's going to do well in your zone. And let's look at these pictures close up. I mean, people just swoon over lavender. When you tell them you're going to plant lavender, they get so excited. Oh, oh, oh. I've lost my sense of smell, but I know these smell great, and I know that people appreciate it. And if people say that they don't want bees, don't plant lavender. A lot of times people are very afraid or very allergic to bees. This is not a plant to use if you are allergic to bees. It will definitely attract the bees. Next one is Mahonia. There's many different Mahonias, but this one is called Soft Caress. It's an introduction by the Sunset Western, part of the Sunset Western Garden Collection. They've come up with some great plants. I think I've said this, that the trend is to breed smaller and smaller plants for our smaller and smaller spaces. This has this beautiful fine netted foliage with these yellow blooms that come very early, January, February typically. Again, another time when not many other plants are blooming, very highly dissected leaves. And it will grow 3 to 6, 8 feet wide and only about a foot to 3 foot tall, and it makes a great ground cover. And I like to use shrubs like this as opposed to many little ground cover plants to make a ground cover. It's just a little bit more effective. They're easier to establish for a commercial grower or someone like me who's planting for profit and planting many gardens. You want to have things that you can really count on and that are going to survive and don't need a lot of fuss and care to grow. And this is one of those plants. And also will grow in almost complete shade, which is a real bonus. It's hard to find plants that do well in shade and bloom. And okay, Nandina, Sienna Sunrise. In Nandina, there's many varieties of Nandina. It's called Heavenly Bamboo, and it's called that because, and it has a bad rap for that same reason. They tend to grow tall and leggy, and what people don't realize is you can cut those tall, leggy stems back, and they'll bush out and grow new stems from the base and renew the plant. But because people don't know that, they just get tall and leggy, and that's also the reason why they get the name Heavenly Bamboo, because those tall, leggy stems kind of look like bamboo, vaguely. But this particular variety, all of the Heavenly Bamboo tend to have a little bit of coloration on their new growth. This one is selected for that coloration, and it keeps putting out new foliage all year long, and it really just gets this intense red color. And when you can get it backlit like this, it just lights up the garden. Amazing. The downside is it doesn't flower and bloom much, and the flowers and berries are very pretty, but because of this works so hard, so many months of the year, it's really a great variety, despite the fact that it doesn't produce flowers. The flowers aren't that showy, but the berries are really nice. Unfortunately, this doesn't have it, but we have to sacrifice some things for other things sometimes. Okay, the next one is salvia. There are many types of salvia. This one is Salvia grigii. The more common varieties are white and red, and pink. But they are now coming and being bred for purples and lavenders and pinks. So this one is purple. I'm suspicious of just purple. One of the nurseries I use here has just been around for a long time, and they just kind of don't seem to care about Latin names anymore and varieties, and so they'll say Hemerocallis yellow, which is about as vague as you could possibly get. Hemerocallis is daylily, and daylilies come in all different kinds of forms. They come in regular daylily, and there's diploid and triploid, which have bigger, thicker stems and more chromosomes, bigger flowers. There's evergreen, there's ever blooming, and when you just say yellow, you're skipping so much. So don't buy a plant if it just says, I wouldn't recommend buying a plant that just says purple, but I chose this one because I wanted to show you a purple version of Salvia grigii, which is a little bit less common. Again, they only grow 1 to 3 feet tall. They're a magnet for hummingbirds and butterflies, and a great asset to any garden, and bloom almost all summer long. When the blooms fade out and they get punky looking, just shear them back, and they'll flush out a whole new set of growth. A lot of plants that bloom much of the year long will benefit greatly by being cut back and allowed to rebloom. Here's another Salvia grigii in the pink range, Tropical Punch. Again, only 1 to 3 feet tall and wide. And let's see, I know I've got a couple other salvias in here. Salvia grigii, Salvia black and blue. This is a really classy plant. The sepals, which is the part that the flower comes out of, are black, and the flowers are blue. Now, this isn't true to the color of the plant. It's very difficult. I have this plant in my garden. I've tried to photograph it, and it comes out a little wishy-washy, but that is the true blue of this plant. You really, up close, at a distance, you won't even see the black part of it. You'll only see the blue, but you can see the black right in the back here, this part here. It's just an extraordinary plant, up close and from a distance, and it will take a little bit of shade. It doesn't like so much heat, and again, cut it back and it will rebloom, and it sprouts from stems under the ground and spreads. It's a really lovely plant. And then we've got Salvia leucantha is the last. No, there's 2 more salvias. Salvia leucantha has these gray-green leaves and these purple flowers. This one is called Midnight, which is selected for a darker, deeper blue. They can grow 3 to 6 feet high and wide. I think that my tendency was to think of this as a smaller plant because I always saw smaller ones, but now that I've been around out here in California for 10 years, I can tell you that they get quite large. And when they do get large, they can look, especially after the first set of flowers have come in, they can get kind of punky looking. And then it's time to cut them back. And they will absolutely renew and regrow and treat you well. Here's one crammed into a very small space. This is going to take over this garden unless they really keep after it and maintain it. But they've worked to try to put a kale in there and do some color echoing, which is great. I'll give them points for that. Salvia leucantha, Midnight. And then the last salvia, just to give you idea of the range of salvias, is another Salvia microphylla, which is very similar to Salvia grigii. Again, there's part of the Western Garden collection again, and there's this killer cranberry. There's some purples and pinks, and there are even smaller plants, 1 to 3 and 1 to 2 feet tall and wide. You can easily keep them that small. And again, cut them back. They rebloom all summer long. Good 6 to 9 months of bloom easily on all the salvias. Okay, let's go back to shrubs here. I'm going to go into a lilac. Everybody's familiar with the Syringa vulgaris, the common lilac. It's a tall, vase-shaped shrub, kind of leggy. This one's the opposite. It's a much denser, bushier plant. It's only going to grow 8 to 10 feet high and wide. Has these great flowers that are pink in bud and open to white, so it gets this kind of dippled effect. Very pretty plant, fragrant. One of the lesser known lilacs, and very, very great. Let's see. And then another syringa, out of the box syringa. This one is a tree. It grows up to 25 feet high and wide. It has these incredible inflorescence. They can be a good foot long. This one's just coming into bloom. It's a young tree. It can get quite a lot larger. It has nice heart-shaped leaves. They don't have very much fall color. It's kind of yellowish. Buds coming out before they bloom. It has beautiful bark. This is really more cinnamon brown than you see here, and really pronounced lenticels, these little breathing spots on the trunk. Coming into fall color. The fall color is kind of a pale yellow at best. And here's a nice look at the trunk. And when you see one of these trees in full size, a mature tree in full bloom, it's quite an impressive sight. Really something. Okay, I think I've got all the shrubs. that I wanted to talk about. Oh, there's some shrubs in, we'll go into perennials. Okay. Gara. Gara Lindheimeri. Gara Lindheimeri is typically a white bloom, but this one is selected for its pink flowers, Siskiyou pink. There's one called Sweet Butterflies, I think, and it's they kind of, flowers can dance on the stems as the stems bloom out. It can get kind of ratty looking over time. Just shear it back. You can shear it back to just nubs in the ground, like you're trying to just eliminate it, and it will come right back and bloom again. All these plants that bloom on new growth, the more new growth they get, the more you prune them, the more they're going to bloom. So let them bloom. When they get ratty looking, cut them back and look for more blooms. Heucheras, or coral bells. There are coral bells that are selected for flowers, and there are coral bells that are selected for foliage. This is clearly selected for foliage. Forever Purple, there are hundreds of cultivars. Palace Purple was one of the first. And so what people are selecting for is better purple, longer purple. Some purple plants, many plants that have purple leaves tend to go towards solid green by the end of the summer. The purple just fades away and the green comes out. So in this case, this is a better, longer lasting purple. And it's just really great for like a carpet of color. And even with a little bit of frost, there's wet and there's frost on the leaves. It can be really dramatic in winter. Here it is with Japanese Hakone grass. What a great contrast. Great contrast in texture and foliage. Texture and foliage color. And here, this is the trial garden. This is the Forever Purple. This one they're common to have the silvery netting over the leaves, and many different varieties, hundreds of varieties of Heuchera. So you can find one that will be the right color combination for what tapestry of colors you're trying to create in your garden. Then we've got one that's got golden foliage, lemon chiffon, and there's many others. But again, it's quite a dramatic punch, especially when you plant these two together. Wow, do they make a show? It's really awesome. And they're only going to grow about foot high. The flowers will come up. Flowers are not the significant part of this. Some people even want to cut them off. They just don't even like the look of them. But the foliage is the big winner here. So let's go back here to perennials. And I'm going to go into an iris. Everybody knows bearded iris. These are Siberian iris. And Siberian iris, 1 to 3 feet tall. And they bloom on long stems. They're great for cut flowers. The beautiful iris-like flower with the falls and the crown. They're only going to bloom for a month or so. And so another variety of, there's many varieties of this Iris siberica. They can be purples, pale blues, pinks, and lavenders and whites. They don't get into any reds or yellows. But there's a variety, a species called Iris pallida, and Iris pallida will take, I think I've got to misclassify it as a ground cover. Iris pallida variegata Iris pallida alone is unique in that it will grow in wet areas, even in standing water, and this will also do that, but this also has these beautiful variegated leaves. So whereas the flowers only last for 2 or 3 weeks max, and then are gone, the green foliage will continue to give you interest throughout the year. So Iris pallida is a really great improvement on the iris, which can look pretty miserable when they're not in bloom. The The typical bearded iris can look a little ratty, but certainly give us some great flowers. Let's see, I'll go back to a few more perennials classified as ground covers. Convolvulus sebatus, it's the ground morning glory. It's nothing like its companion, the vining morning glory, which can really be invasive and get out of control. This is a very neat plant. It will only grow neat and tidy. It will only grow about a foot tall, and it will grow 3 to 6 feet wide and make a great ground cover. Look at these singing, shining faces. Wow. This is what I call a hard-working plant. Doesn't need much water. It's just blooms its heart out, and you can forget about it. You don't have to worry about trimming it. Let it go. Let it spill over a wall. Let it do its thing. Great plant. It's great for drought-tolerant gardens as well. Very drought-tolerant. Let's see. Let's go back to ground covers. And oh, one more heuchera, just to give you an idea of the variegation. This one is called Carmel, and it's just really stunning. It's like light starts to get in this and play on it, sunlight. It can be spectacular. And that shows you how later in the season the color tends to fade a little bit. It's brighter in the spring, but still, really, this is a winner. Okay, now we're going to go into some. Do we do all the perennials? Covered. Oh, okay. Another salvia that I got to speak about is Salvia Mystic Spires. I only got one picture of it, but boy, this plant is a color like it's like indigo blue, and it blooms all summer long. It grows 3 to 5 feet tall and wide, and just these inflorescences can be 2 feet long easily, and blooming. There's always bees over it, butterflies, hummingbirds. They all love it. Great plant. Talked about yet another salvia. Salvias there's just so many. This is more of a typical perennial. This will grow all the way up into zone 4 and 5. And this one's called Cardona, Salvia nemorosa Cardona. But Salvia nemorosa has hundreds of cultivars. And just find one in your area that is dependable for you. There are so many variations. They're all very similar. Great contrasted with, here we have yellow sun drops. Really nice. Look at that color. Okay, this is another Arctodus. It's a very small plant. It only grows about a foot to 1.5 feet tall. This one is called Pink Sugar, and my God, the flowers are vivid. It's great for, it will grow together, it will continue to spread and grow into a ground cover. If you plant them like this, they did here, about 2 feet apart, they will grow together and make a carpet. And in the spring, when they bloom for about a month, they are just gorgeous colors. They come in pinks and reds, and in that, but this one has a beautiful combination of pink and yellow, which is one of my favorite color combinations in the garden, and great silvery green foliage. It will take a little bit of shade, but pretty much wants full sun, and the best way to kill it is to water it too much. So definitely a good xeriscape plant. Let's see what else we can. I think I've about covered them all. Let me double check. Okay, we've covered all those. Shrubs, we've covered all those. Ground covers. Mismatched, covered those. Okay, so that's it, everybody. I thank you for tuning in, and I wish you best of success and joy and happiness in creating gardens for yourself and for others, and have a great rest of the year, and may 2021 blow the pants off of 2020. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.